Are going to get started. All right. And then got Wesley on the line and making sure that we're going live also on Facebook. So everybody, I just want to welcome everybody to this New Church Impact, where we are talking about continuing on about the micro-activism piece. And, the last conversation that we had, we're like, not all churches are going to be out there marching on the lines, going out to these marches and going on to Capitol Hill or any of that. But activism is still important within the faith, and being the advocate for those who are being oppressed and marginalized and things of that nature. But each church, each congregation should find its own calling through prayer and discernment and things like that. And so once you do, no matter how big, no matter how small, it's still important. So we understand that. So that activism piece. And now we're at a point where we're talking about, okay, once we figure out that passion, where we want to put our energy to it, and how do we organize around it? How do we get people to build up this people power, the capacity to make positive change for the common good? And so today we have a special guest, Reverend Dr. Wise Baker, has come to us and to help us kind of journey along and figure out what ways do we need to think about when we think about organizing from a local congregation perspective. And so Dr. Dietra Wise Baker, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be
here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, can I make me do that? How you all doing? Dietra Wise Baker. I guess I'll introduce my hats and maybe why I'm having this conversation with you. I mean, I should first tell you I am a community organizer. And so I am the lead organizer for Heartland Action here in Missouri. It's a Gamaliel affiliated group, the state org in Missouri. And I run a project called When Black Women Lead, organizing the 250,000 approximately Black women voters in Missouri. So doing some electoral organizing. Other hat, the transitional minister for Centennial Christian Church here in St. Louis. And so like many of you all, in the midst of, congregational vitality and transformation work, or in your case, some of you, new church start. And then I am a professor, my full-time job. I'm actually assistant professor of community leadership at Eden Theological Seminary, where I get to think about the formation of leaders in communities at the intersection of our faith, Christian discipleship, and what it means to be connected to these historical and contemporary movements, and what we can learn from them about how we do our work in the world.
Awesome. So when we had a conversation about, when we're thinking about how do we help congregations, especially in particular smaller congregations within our denomination, and I would say any congregation, how do we get into the practice of organizing? Like, what does that look like? As I would say organizing is a spiritual discipline. So what are some of the things that when you talk to these congregations, what are some of the tips that you give them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing we have to talk about, it's like the parable in organizing. And some of you who are on the call, you've heard this parable before. And so there's a great parable in organizing, and it's about a village of where there are children drowning mysteriously in the village. And the village has to, is doing the right thing, right? They're getting the kids, they're drowning out of the water. They're going and saving those kids, those babies. That's what we say, babies in the river. And at some point, someone's like, why are there babies in the river? Someone starts asking that question. And the villagers decide that some people are going to stay and keep getting the babies out of the river. And then some of them are going to go upstream and see who's putting the babies in the river. Right. This is the great parable in organizing. It's beginning to ask the questions about why things are the way they are in our communities, whether that's housing, whether that's hunger, whether that's economics and jobs, what's going on with immigration, and that's why. Why are these the things that we are experiencing? And that doesn't mean that we can ignore sort of the immediate needs and crisis, for example, like that people need to eat, or people need housing, or people need food, right? But at some point, we got to begin to ask the question, why do people need food? Why do people need clothing? What are the structures and the systems that are creating this crisis, these needs, where people are unable or compromised or vulnerable to be able to meet their needs or to live fully in community? What is prohibiting that? And that's the first transition that a congregation has to make in its thinking and in its theology. Then it has to ask the question, what does God require of us? Does God require us to do anything about the why in our community?
Mm-hmm.
Or is that for someone else to do? And I would argue that Jesus was very concerned
Right.
about about the community. One might argue that most of Jesus's ministry and work was outside in the community and with the people. And so the church has to have a theological understanding that it has a call and work outside of the four walls of its congregation, that it wants to not just get the babies out of the river in the parable, but that the congregation is going to make a decision to go upstream and figure out what is putting those babies in the river. Why are they in the river? And when congregations begin to ask that question, that unleashes what we call sort of a power analysis. You begin to understand what are the forces that are acting upon communities and neighborhoods to create what people are living in and what people are living through.
Mm-hmm. And when you talk about power, is there a particular definition of power that you're utilizing whenever you're talking about this power analysis, so to speak?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think different organizers might define it differently, but I mean, in the organizing tradition that I come from, it's real simple. But we'll use a biblical one too. It's the ability to get things done. I think a theological definition of power is the Spirit of God that moves us to
Mm-hmm.
act and to make changes, to not leave things as they are, and often described in the scriptures as a force that suddenly comes upon us. In the New Testament, it's actually, in the Greek, it's dynamite. It's something like explosive that when it's set off, things are going to change. But power in its, most basic definition is the ability to get things done in our community, the ability to get things changed. And to do that together, not as an individual. And so when we talk about power and community organizing, we're talking about collective power or collective action, community power. This isn't about an individual acting by themselves or on their own. This is about a community that has discerned a direction, a why that they want to have an impact on, and then begin to build relationships with others in the community to have an impact on that why.
Yeah. So so in New Church Ministry, we have this thing called Leadership Academy. And in one of the modules that we teach about power. And we have like this power mapping exercise that we do, and we talk about coercive power, where
Uh-huh.
when we're assessing the community, that there are certain institutions that have like this coercive power that they power over.
Uh-huh.
And the collective power that we're talking about is like influential power, where we
Uh-huh.
might not have direct uh impact on policies written, that sort of thing, but we have that influential power to talk to those different institutions, whether it's the education system, the housing system, you know, whatever system that's there, that the church has that influential power to make positive change. And so um, when when a community, when a church, when a congregation does that, you know, we were talking about this power of proximity, of having these connections with different people. Like, how important is that idea of proximity within organizing?
Yeah, I'll tag back in on the power part because um, power is not just sort of the it's not just like advocacy power, right? So we can affect like who's in office, for example. If we were to, there's different systems of power and different levers of power, and legislative or electoral power is sort of one area that we can move the power lever. We could talk
Mm,
about others, like there's administrative, there's corporate, there's cultural, right? There's administrative, there's these areas of power that we could talk about how to move those levers. But let's just use electoral for an example. We do determine like who sits in those offices, but break that down. Like how many people participate in like their local and state elections? How many people are educated about who they're voting for? How many people really understand the issues that are being voted for in their communities and really understand those and have vetted those? Like a lot of people, even if they go to the polls, they're kind of blind, right? They don't really understand deeply what's going on. They haven't been politicized, if you will,
mm,
right? And so just around power, like there's a lot of our power that has been left on the table. There's a lot of power that we've given over to politicians or folks that really does and belong and is in the hands of the people. The people just have to take up that power in new and refreshing ways. And so to pivot to your second question about proximity is sometimes we're not close enough to the problem to be able to make a change about it, right? It may
mm,
be something that doesn't necessarily directly impact our lives, or our pockets or our world as a church. And so sometimes, in organizing, a lot of times, I was asked, like, what is your proximity to the actual problem, to the why, right? Sometimes we can't see the why because we're not close enough to it, right?
mm,
I may
mm,
not be the one who's hungry. I may not, I don't have a problem going to the grocery store. So I may not notice that in this other neighborhood that there isn't like fresh food and a quality grocery store that people can afford to buy the food in. I may not notice that because I can get in my car and I can go to the grocery store in my neighborhood with no problem. So the whys don't always hit us. It comes from us being in deep relationships with a variety of people with different perspectives and different experiences that begins to open our eyes to see, oh, this is an issue. And I could share a story about that, if that's helpful.
yeah.
Yeah, like the organizing that I did before this was with formerly incarcerated people. And so a group called Expo. And I have never been incarcerated. I had people in my family that were, so I had some like that kind of experience, but not directly. I had never been in prison myself. I was a chaplain for 15 years
Hmm.
in the detention centers, but that's not the same as being there, right?
Hmm.
And right, and so when they started organizing with the group that I was organizing at the time, when they were in charge of organizing, there was a building that all of them had to go to when they got out of jail or prison.
Hmm.
Everybody, a lot of us knew the building, but we didn't know what it was. Why would we? Because we weren't the ones who had to stay there. And they knew that there was a problem with how that was run. We found that it was a family that was running it, that was millions of dollars that was not appropriated for the people that were staying in there transitional when they got out of prison, were not getting the services that they were promised. Anyway, those leaders who had been directly impacted were aware of that. They were able to design a campaign that targeted the exact issues because they had lived them. They weren't things that we were guessing about. And lo and behold, we were able to get a different sponsor of that program and that building, and was able to remove that board and those the folks that were managing that particular, it was called Dismas House, that were managing that property, and somebody else got it. That's doing a better job with it and is more accountable to it. But it was formerly incarcerated people that were directly impacted, that had lived in that building, that were the ones that did the organizing to change what was happening in that building. And that's an example of what we mean by proximity. So a lot of these issues we may have a heart for, we may, God may be pressing us to care, but we are not in relationship with the people that are actually being impacted by the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And, with that idea of proximity, and there's this other idea when we come into back to power, the question of power, there's that empowerment element whenever, and like, what's the best way to empower people to help make them make change for themselves or for their community? That's another question. So like, how do we shift to that? Because, sometimes the system just wants to hold on, right? And just want to keep things status quo and everything else like that. And it just like seems so daunting and overwhelming. So how do you encourage people to keep moving on and keep, trying to empower those who need to make that change?
Yeah, I mean, I think, once now we're getting into in organizing, tactics and strategy, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, how do we win? Like, how do we win? And, most organizers are going to tell you to start small. Like, what's something that we could win? Let's cut an issue that we can win. Something easy to help us test our power and to begin to get into our consciousness and our spirits that we actually can make substantial change in our community. We're not convinced of that yet. We kind of get overwhelmed when we see all the forces acting upon the community, and we kind of throw our hands up, and we may go just back to sort of the crisis mode of taking the babies out of the river, right? And we stop looking upstream or working upstream. So part of it is beginning to bite off, we call it cut an issue. What is a piece that we can actually do, right?
Yeah.
And there's probably a lot that we can do. We haven't been upstream. We don't spend a lot of our energy and our resources upstream, right? So we're not familiar with how to deal with power. But let me give an example, of like a lot of ways that people start. Like in a community, people may start something as simple as, hey, there's a problem where people are running through, this particular intersection, and, somebody got hurt. This is like a simple place that someone, or a community may start. What do we need to do to start talking to citizens, building relationships with citizens in this community, including the families that may have been impacted. Maybe there was an accident or someone got hurt. Talking to those folks, getting their testimonies, getting some signatures from them, and then some members in that neighborhood getting together and going to the city council meeting and proposing that there be a change to the intersection there, that there be a stop sign, or that there'll be something else that's going to help, a speed bump or some other thing that the community discerns would change this problem or help that problem. That's a small thing like that communities can do. Another one is like illegal dumping. Like, so that's a big place like that, communities will start, like where there's dumping in their communities. All right, let's get the neighbors together. Let's knock on doors. Let's document the problem. Let's get signatures. Let's go to the first level of where the power is that can change that. And we show up together, we research, and we make a request about what needs to be done. And if we can't be heard, then we, like we did in one precinct, then we'll organize the next mayoral election. And we do some analysis about how many votes we need and how many people we need to engage in order to have enough of a shift in the election. Since the current mayor is not listening to us, perhaps we need to organize for a new mayor. And so we were able to do that in a small municipality in St. Louis County. And so that's just a little bit of a picture of how you kind of get people to get out there. But it all involves the same steps. It involves, making a shift to ask the why. It involves, picking something that you can get your neighbors and people in the community care about and to show up for together, and doing some power analysis to know where is the first place that we can push a power lever, and that we actually go show up, follow through, and push it. And if that doesn't work, we step back, we do some analyzing, and then we reorganize ourselves to push the next lever. That's a simple plan, but you
Right.
know, they get more complicated.
Yeah. Yeah. So just for the folks that are on with us, if you have any questions for Dr. Wise Baker, please put them in the Q&A thing, and we'll get to them. While we're waiting for some questions, Dr. Baker, the other question is, like, we've all heard Simon Sinek's 5 whys, the process of getting to the purpose, sort of thing. Is there a method that you recommend, like, for congregations to kind of like look at the why for them, that sort of thing? Is there a methodology that you use?
Yeah, that would be a much longer conversation, but I think here's the questions, for a congregation. And I'll just use my own, for an example. What's going on in the neighborhood that your church is in, and what's going on where the people in that neighborhood. So what are the issues? Like, is the church aware? I know in some cases there are churches where people are kind of driving in and they don't necessarily live in that community.
Right.
Has that church made a commitment to be a neighborhood church and to care about the issues in that community? Like, these are the beginnings, because if you don't have that foundation and that commitment, then you can't answer the next set of questions, right? Or you won't have the impetus to do that. So let's presume the church has made a decision. Yes, we are dedicated to community and to the issues in the community. Well, what are those needs? How is that church in relationship with people in the community that don't necessarily come to that church? How is the church doing that? In our case, our church has a very strong outreach ministry. We do feeding programs, we do community events, we do collaborative events with different partners in the community. All of this has led to, very deep ties and relationships and knowledge about what is going on in the community. So one of the things that we knew even before the tornado hit in St. Louis is there's an issue with affordable housing. I mean, that's in most of folks' communities, right? And for some of you all who are not in St. Louis, it's more dire because you live in way more expensive areas than St. Louis is. But even in St. Louis, there aren't enough affordable housing units, right? And so that's a big, that's a big thing to chew on. But then we started asking, okay, if people need temporary housing, where is that happening? How many of those beds are available? Who's responsible for that? What does it mean for us to partner with others to begin a long-term plan to create a certain amount of units? Like, we can't solve the affordable housing program problem in St. Louis City, right? But how can we make a significant contribution through our resources or through our land or through our connections and partnerships to have a plan that does offer a certain amount of affordable housing units or protect affordable housing units? And in our case, we have 3 affordable housing units already in our history. So it's not necessarily something new for our church, but those are some of the beginning questions. Are we committed to this community? Are we in real relationship with the community where we can hear and begin to discern what is going on here and what do people need? I gave an example of affordable housing in our case. It's that and probably 50,000 other things. Like, it's not like it's very different from community to community, food deserts, affordable housing, education, inequality issues, right? These things, are present pretty much everywhere.
Yeah. So, and we've been talking a little bit more of a urban context. Is there anything that's different when it comes to a rural context? Like, countryside sort of things.
I mean, I don't often think that the issues are that different. We organize in a statewide group for our electoral work, and we have organizers that are urban and rural in that statewide group, and we're in Missouri, so it's
Right.
mostly rural. Just for folks that don't know our our demographics, kind of after you come out of St. Louis City and you come out of Kansas City,
Yeah.
it's pretty rural.
Right.
So that's where most of our organizing it happens and is. Uh, for those orgs that do that. And so I mean, it's the same things. They have to build relationships with their neighbors. And sometimes in rural areas, that's a little bit easier.
Mm.
Just because folks tend to know each other a little bit better. You don't have the numbers that sometimes you have in the city, that you don't have the same you don't have the same capacity needs. So sometimes you can get a little further, kind of at the speed of trust in a rural area than in an urban area, just because you don't have the density of people. But the people are no less complex.
Yeah, right.
They're
Yeah, I
no
mean,
less complex in terms of what it takes to invest, to build relationships with folk, to get them to a place where they're going to actually do something and not just talk about it, is a significant investment.
Awesome, thank you. So there is a question that Carolyn Higginbotham asked, and she asks, what strategies help congregants move from pulling the babies out of the water to looking upstream at the root causes and commit to addressing them?
Well, I can tell you what some people have done. I have some slides here, but you can't see them. So training is one way that training is a way to move congregations from just kind of doing social service outreach needs, which most of our churches do in some kind of form. Most of our churches do some kind of social service or outreach needs. So there has to be a commitment of some folks in the congregation to go upstream. And who is going to be the strategic person to organize that? Sometimes the pastor, sometimes that's a small group, sometimes that's a passionate individual. But at some point, there has to be a critical mass of folks inside of the life of the church that believe that this is important. And it has to grow beyond that, or you all probably know this. Then you have kind of the group in the church that does the social justice stuff. And nobody else really in the congregation does that, because the congregation hasn't owned that. And so some congregations go as far as changing their mission and vision statements to include specifically that they will have a social justice frame or a social justice action or deliberative or community work, like they say it specifically, so that it's owned by the whole church. And different churches have different processes by which they are able to go make those statements. Some churches do in-reaches where they go through a training and they learn what we call one-on-ones. One-on-ones is the basic tool to organize people based around what they're passionate and they care about. And those one-on-one conversations are done in the entire congregation. It takes a while, even if the congregation is small, but it's a good investment to get the congregation to say, okay, we're all on the same page about what we're passionate about, or we're going to make some priorities. We can't do everything. We don't have capacity to do everything. And so here are the 2 or 3 things that keep coming up in this in-reach. And these are things as a congregation we're going to decide to work on. And then we go into a research phase. Some people do book studies, invite guests, connect with local organizations that are doing this work in your community. And there are a lot of them there, probably, right? So the faith-based community organizing group. So there's Gamaliel, there's Faith in Action, there's DART, there's Black Lives Matter, there's the Movement for Black Lives. There's, in some communities, there's BYP 100. There's somewhere in your community, there's probably a group, a grassroots group that is practicing some discipline, some art and discipline of community organizing. And is the church connected to them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those are just some quick,
Yeah. Off the top of your head.
yeah, but that's a lot. But that's quick.
Yeah. So can we go back a little bit to the one-on-ones? Because to me, that is the foundational tool, not just the basics, it's foundational. It's like the cornerstone when it comes to this. And it's for me when we're talking about this within Leadership Academy, it's more than just talking to the individuals within the congregation, but it's also encouraging the individuals within the congregation to do one-on-ones outside in the community.
Absolutely.
Can you explain more of the process of how you train congregations to do so?
Yeah, I mean, for those of you, I think everyone probably knows what a one-on-one with, but it is not just like a regular conversation. It's very focused on stirring up in the person that you're talking to what they're passionate about, what they're interested in, what will they focus on, what will they give their energy to. And so, it's generally like a 30-minute conversation that you schedule and that's formal and that is accountable. And so, like, you asked me like what I'm doing. This is the thing about you saying it's foundational is that I'm doing them right now. Like, it is the thing that organizers hate to do, but that you have to be accountable about doing. Like, they are the foundational, most important thing that we do. And a lot of us don't have the discipline to stick at them in the ways that we should. I mean, I'll just ask a simple question. How many people have you talked to in your congregation besides just doing activities with them at church? Like, you really sat down and most of the conversation was them talking and you listening to who they are, where they come from, and what they believe. How many of us have had that kind of conversation with most of the people in our church? Raise your hand. Like, hardly any of us, right? And so you just literally can't do enough of these. And they are the foundation for building the kind of relationship that will prepare people to act together in public collectively to make difference and change. And so just to go back to that. And so generally when we do an in-reach with a congregation, we will go to the leaders and say, okay, we're going to come in, we're going to do a one-on-one training. We do the one-on-one training, and then we get everybody that is there to sign up to do a certain amount of those in a certain number of time and to be accountable to somebody for when they have completed them. We come back in that time frame and say, all right, did you do them? What can we learn from the conversations we had about who we are as a congregation and what's passionate? Are there themes? Are there places that we need to address? We often found there are pastoral or administrative things that we needed to take care of related in those conversations, right? And then you go there from there and you share that report. And then, depending on your church's administrative processes or governance processes, then you present, okay, these are the things that people said were important. These are the whys in the community. We're going to now go into a research project where so we can learn more about what these issues are in our community. And that includes us now going into the community to do a certain number of one-on-ones. We're going to go to these neighbors. We're going to go to these partner organizations. We're going to get a fuller picture of what is going on here. And then once we finish those conversations, we're going to come back and then we're going to make some decisions about our priorities and what it is we're trying to build. And that's probably where some training needs to come in, where some folks that run campaigns and cut issues and do that stuff can help a congregation maybe in relationship with another congregation or a larger org that maybe is probably moving some things where the congregation can then add its capacity, or if the congregation wants to do something that org is not doing, them training the congregation on how to begin to walk that out. And there's people that can do this in their sleep,
Right. That's
in your community.
Awesome. Yeah. It's the other thing that I find with the one-on-ones, it's like it brings people back to the proximity thing, because so many people they commute to their congregation, to their church building, and they live outside the community. And to understand the community, you really have to have those deep conversations, invite somebody to coffee and, have those conversations with them, sort of thing. So that's why I say it's so key and foundational. It's the cornerstone of ministry.
Yeah, it's a regular for a congregation or a leader or a pastor or a church planter. It should be a regular discipline. I
Mhm.
have 5 one-on-one conversations a week. That's my goal for what I'm building in this particular time.
Mhm.
5 of those kinds of conversations a week. They're very specific about what it is I'm building. So I'm talking to a particular group of people in a particular place because of what I'm working on. I'm working with Black women voters. So I'm talking to Black women voters. I'm talking to first time elected officials or Black women that are running for office. And I'm talking to Black women elected officials. That's my one-on-one list, right?
Mhm.
And and that's who I'm talking to. And I have 5 of those conversations a week towards what I'm working on related to when Black women lead, right? And
Mhm.
so if a congregation or a church planter or a pastor can be very intentional, like if I was a new pastor, which I am, which I am. How many of these? I've known these people for 30 years in my case. And we did do it in Reach out of COVID 2 years ago, our transitional team. So we did each do a series of 3 to 5 one-on-ones with our congregation. We're just in a completely different place now.
Yeah.
But we did do that. So we were able to have like 50 to 60 conversations when all the leaders threw in on that. And that gave us and some people, started coming back to church after that. Imagine
Mhm.
that, right? Because they felt connected again. They felt like
Right.
they were in relationship again. So yeah, we can't overstate the importance of those. And then there is technical expertise more than likely on the ground. And if you don't, the Center for Live Faith and Organizing here at Eden, we have monthly workshops on community organizing, and we bring up the best organizers in the country that are at the intersection of faith and grassroots organizing here to teach on different topics in organizing. And we have a certificate program. So you can come here, you can bring your congregation here, your small group here, your social justice group here that's trying to figure out some things. And I will personally work with you on creating an organizing plan if you come as a congregation.
Awesome. So that would, well, and there was a question about that, like, if bringing congregations in, it's like, how do you deal with pushback from folks who see community organizing as separate from the gospel or ministry?
Yep.
How do you help people connect the two?
Yeah, this is a discipleship, teaching, and theology problem. And so somewhere, but the teaching and discipleship leadership of the church uh, has to make a theological call and has to have clarity about, is this part of the gospel or is this an addendum? And if this is central to the gospel, then more than likely there's going to have to be a systematic curriculum by how that is taught and exposed to the congregation, right? Is that a book study? Is that a sermon series? Is that Bible study? Is that small groups? It probably is all of those things over a period of time. So I'm saying there has to be an intentional teaching and discipleship plan for people to get this as part of their theology. People are resistant because who teaches that justice is central? I mean, some people do, but that wasn't the Christianity that I wasn't brought up that way. I was
Mhm.
taught that saving souls was the main thing that I'm supposed to be doing. And so people don't necessarily know that, hey, Jesus came not to just save souls, but to save the whole person. Salvation actually means wholeness.
Mm.
And if people are not whole and their communities are not whole, we are not doing saving. We are not completing the salvific work that we've been called to. But that has to be taught. That has to be broken down. That has to be, discussed. People need time to digest that, and where is that kind of program or space in our church and communities for that to be a regular part of people's diet spiritually?
Yeah. Well, and just from my own personal experience, because I'm not a cradle disciple. I
Mhm,
come from the evangelical world that
mhm,
shared that same theology. Our
mhm,
purpose, the mission of God is to save souls, sort of thing. And that,
mhm,
but even in my time of church planting with those organizations, those highly evangelical organizations, they didn't like the term social justice,
mhm,
but they knew that, this kind of like liberation sort of idea needs to be part of the whole gospel. And so they called it mercy ministries, and that, mercy was a discipline, acting mercy and compassion. I was part of the missional church movement for a long time, and some people would change it, call it passional.
Passional.
Because, even though the motivation was a little bit different than, really, really helping the person to be liberated from all the constraints of the systemic sin that we have in the world.
Right.
The idea of like people, Jesus saves, not just the soul, but the whole person, was there. They just didn't call it social justice work. Again, it was like mercy ministry, something that was palpable to me. But, even those evangelical folks that I was, with, saw the purpose of social justice, right? So,
Yeah, and it's, I mean, I think this is such an important conversation. This is all I do here at Eden, is because, I mean, that's the formation part of, sending new leaders out into the community. Um, is this that second piece, like, and it's a theological lift, like to really dig and say, okay, you all, what does this mean and what does it look like? If it's not just about getting babies out of the bathwater, where do we go in the scripture for justification? Sometimes, is what people need. But where do we get justification that, this part of the ministry should matter? And so I think that's plentiful. I think that's easy to find in the scriptures. Jesus is healing folks. Jesus is raising folks from the dead. Jesus is breaking boundary and including people that people don't think should be included. Like, it's all over the place. But people don't understand that to be political. And sometimes people confuse partisan with political. And no, I don't think Jesus was partisan, obviously. But I do think Jesus was political in that Jesus cared about what happened to people in the public arena, what happened to their health, were they able to eat, were they able to be healthy, were they able to be whole, were they able to be free. Jesus seemed could they live? Could they be alive? The forces that continue to kill them, could they live beyond that and through that? And Jesus seems committed to people's liberation, seems committed to loving them, and seems committed to them being free. And so we have to say, okay, what does that look like in 2025 in my neighborhood? And starting to make that translation. And that would transform many of our ministries. And I know people say mercy, and mercy is important, but sometimes that does not mean a systemic or a social analysis. That does not mean, that we're going to go and up against the forces that are destroying people, like racism or sexism or heterosexism. We'll stop when we start getting there, because that stuff is political. That's political stuff. And these are actually forces that are destroying people's lives and destroying their salvation.
And does the Center for Lived Faith and Organizing that you run, you say that you have trainings to help congregations to move into that and to really connect that, I would say, an ecclesiology of organizing, so like if people are interested in that, like where do they go?
So someone put it in the chat. You just come on to Eden's website and click on the Center for Lived Faith and Organizing, and you'll see we'll have like monthly workshops, 4 to 5 hours with organizers that are living at the intersection of faith and organizing. And so like the upcoming one is like, how do you organize directly impacted people? It's literally, how do you get close to the people that you need to have proximity with? And then when you get close to them, how do you help empower them to organize themselves to make changes that are impacting them? The last group of directly impacted people that I organized were parents of kids who were in juvenile. I would go with them to the courts and stuff like that. And I just got to a point like, okay, we need to have a place where we can train parents to understand the juvenile system. And then they can train the next parent on the juvenile system. How can they advocate? There's something called participatory defense. It's a nationwide program where the parents learn how to do social bioprofiles, like, so I can tell the narrative and story of my kid instead of this lawyer who may tell the story in a way that you don't get to see my kid as a whole person, and you don't know my kid better than me. It's not that my kid may not need some accountability, but let me give you an idea in partnership with the community about what that accountability would be, what it would be like to help my kid become whole again, which is not locking them up and throwing away the key. Here's my plan as a parent that you expect me to have any other time, but somehow when they get into juvenile, I'm supposed to shut up and just let you do whatever you want to my kid, right? And so beginning to organize those parents that they deserve a voice, that they should not be embarrassed, that they should not be ashamed, that their parental rights have not been taken away because their kids are been accused of a crime, that they can still fight and advocate for their kids and then teach them how to do it. Like, that's the last organizing that I did, and I left them in the hands of Michael Brown Sr. He was the next organizer of those parents, which, yeah. So that was somebody good to leave them in the hands of, but but that's the fun we're having in St. Louis. We're in a rich place of organizing work, but I believe that these folks and there are people in the community that want to come alongside you all. You just may not know that they're there. And then, of course, there's the national networks. And, I'm a part of Gamaliel, but that may not be who's next to you or who you vibe with. There may be somebody else in your community. Faith in Action may be there. Industrial Areas Foundation, IAF may be there. DART may be there. I don't care. Whoever is doing the work with the sensibilities and the values that you respect, that can teach you these skills, is a place to go. And the Center for Live Faith and Organizing is a place that you can come. You can bring your congregation. You all can enroll in the certificate program. And what I've done is, like, 5 or 6 folks from my congregation will come. They'll all take different stuff that they're interested in because it's arranged by topics. They all finish their 5 classes, they get their certificate, and then I meet with the congregation and we spend some time doing an organizing plan. I assess all the organizing skills that you have been given. So you'll learn one-on-ones, you'll learn power analysis, you'll learn how to map power for organizing, you'll learn how to cut issues, you'll know how to develop a strategic campaign. All throughout that, you'll get all of those pieces, we'll put them all together and send you on your way. And then I check up on you in 6 months and say, all right, how's it going? And sometimes it's people connecting with other folks that they don't know, and I can help you connect them because I know all of them. Or or if you don't want to connect and you want to do something individual or that somebody else isn't doing, or maybe you just happen to be in an area nobody's in. That's very rare, by the way, but it's possible, I guess. Like in some of the rural areas, there may not be like a group that you can get to like close enough. Then what would it mean for you to begin organizing, and what's your actual capacity for what you've been called to do, and assessing that and creating a plan that works with, your size, your capacity, your time, your energy. It's like a realistic plan, not a I'm going to change the whole world in 5 months plan. So that's the CFLO. If you all are interested in that path, no pressure.
No pressure, no
but
pressure.
We're here.
And if they want to connect with you directly, are you all on social media platforms? What's your email?
Yeah, just come on.
Okay.
Yeah, just come on through Eden. My email is Wise Baker. I'm putting it in the chat. Wise Baker at eden.edu. Justin, Reverend Dr. Justin Shamel is the recruiter for the Center for Live, Faith, and Organizing. So if you reach out to me, the first thing I'm gonna do is send you to him, and he's gonna call you and have a one-on-one with you. And ask you what you're interested in and what's going on, and help us understand what you want to do and how you want to do it. And then we get you enrolled and ready to go. But you can register for the workshop by just clicking on a couple of links that were put in the chat.
Awesome. So Dr. Wise Baker, thank you so much for being here with us. We're getting close to the end. So one final thing, I guess, is if we're kind of like in this state of like, I know I want to do something, like if I'm a pastor wanting to lead the congregation to do something, but there's some pushback there. is there a prayer that you tell people to pray to stir the people's hearts?
Yep, it's called pray and schedule that one-on-one. Yeah. So you want to stir their heart, go talk to them. Like really, like have the one of the bills that we got passed in Missouri, I still can't believe it is, when I was organizing early on, was called Raise the Age. It was to get 17-year-olds out of the adult prison system in Missouri. And we were one of the last 5 states to still hold 17-year-olds with adults.
Wow.
Missouri is Missouri is a super Republican state. I didn't think that we had a chance, okay? But, we had to work with who we had. And, amazingly, having those one-on-ones and bringing those parents and those kids to testify and tell their stories about why being a 17-year-old in prison is not a good thing and that Missouri should do something different than it was doing, that worked. And there were Republican sponsors of the bill, and it passed eventually. It took us 3 years, but we did get it changed. And so I'm just saying that to tell you, like, I've been amazed myself at the power of organizing, the power of practicing the fundamentals, and that human hearts can be changed. And sometimes, if that can't be changed, there are other interests that people have that you can organize them around to get them to do the right thing, even if they don't want to, or it's not, but it works for them overall for some other reason, which you'll learn when you do target analysis and you plan strategies. You do that understanding who people are, but doing those one-on-ones and building those relationships offer more possibilities than you might imagine.
Amen. Well, thank you so much again. And for all the rest of you that are disciples of Christ, you're probably wondering, well, why is New Church Ministry involved in this kind of conversation? Well, justice is a deep passion of mine. And I think every new congregation within our denomination needs to have that as a central core of it, because it's within our identity statement, it's within our vision statement. Having a passion for justice is in the disciples' vision statement. And so there are other resources that the disciples of Christ have, and I'm going to put them in the chat. Go there to the different justice ministries that we have within our denomination to help find those different resources. It takes all of us, not just one of us. It takes all of us together to work towards justice, to commit, to have positive change in this society. And boy, do we need it. For such a time as this has been the common theme that I've been hearing this past year. So again, Dr. Wise Baker, thank you so much for joining us. And if you have any questions, folks, reach out to us, newchurchministry.org. Get on to our social media platforms. If you have more questions for Dr. Wise Baker, again, go to the center's website. Again, we have it in there at Eden Theological Seminary. So eden.edu, look for Center for Lived Faith and Organizing. And we're here to help you on their journey with that. So with that, have a great day and have a blessed day. Bye.
Bye.